The letter arrived on a crisp October morning. Its crisp white envelope a stark contrast to the autumn leaves piling up on Clara's porch. She was 67. Her silver hair pulled into a loose bun. Her hands weathered but steady as she sliced it open with a butter knife. The words inside hit her like a gust of winter wind. Clara, we've decided it's best if you don't attend this year's family reunion. It's a sensitive time, and we want to keep things comfortable. No signature, just the crest of her husband's family. The Warrens, embossed in gold at the bottom. Clara's fingers trembled, not from age, but from the sting of rejection. She sat at her kitchen table, the one she and Tom had bought 40 years ago when they were newlyweds, dreaming of a life filled with love and laughter. Tom, her husband of 45 years, was upstairs, his cough echoing faintly through their modest Vermont home. The Warren family reunion was a tradition, held every summer at their sprawling vacation home by Lake Champlain, a place Clara had poured her heart into. Year after year, cooking meals, tending the garden, and welcoming every cousin, aunt, and uncle with open arms. And now, this. Clara's eyes burned, but she refused to cry. She'd always known the Warrens saw her as an outsider. She wasn't born into their old money lineage, with its generations of lawyers and bankers. She was Clara Thompson, daughter of a schoolteacher and a mechanic, who'd met Tom at a community dance and won his heart with her wit and warmth. The Warrens had tolerated her, but their smiles were thin, their invitations laced with condescension. This letter, though, was a new low. Tom shuffled into the kitchen, his flannel shirt hanging loose on his thinning frame. "What's that, love?" he asked, nodding at the letter. Clara handed it to him without a word. His face darkened as he read, his jaw tightening. "They can't do this," he said, his voice rough but firm. "You're my wife. Your family." Clara shook her head, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. "They've made it clear I'm not. Tom. Not to them." She stood, smoothing her apron, and walked to the window. Outside, the maple trees blazed red and gold, a reminder of the world's quiet beauty. "But I'm done trying to prove myself to them." Tom reached for her hand, his grip warm and familiar. "Then we'll make our own reunion," he said. "With our family." Clara's heart lifted at the thought of their 3 children, Lila, Mark, and Sophie, and their grandchildren, who filled their lives with joy. The Warrens might have their lake house and their traditions, but Clara had something stronger, love that didn't demand perfection. That night, Clara called her children. Lila, 42, a pediatrician with a no-nonsense streak, was furious. "They can't just exclude you, Mom. That's our lake house to grew up there." Mark, 39, a quiet carpenter, said little but promised to be there. Sophie, the youngest at 35, a writer with a fiery spirit, was already planning. "We'll show them, Mom. We'll make our own memories." Clara didn't know it yet, but that letter was the spark that would set everything in motion. For years, she'd swallowed her pride, smiled through the Warrens' slights, and made their lake house a home for everyone. Now, her family would rally around her, not just to reclaim a place, but to redefine what family meant. The next morning, Clara woke with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't going to beg for a seat at the Warrens' table. She'd build her own. She called her old friend Margaret, a real estate agent who knew the Lake Champlain area like the back of her hand. "Margaret," Clara said, her voice firm, "I need you to look into something for me. The Warren Lake house, find out if it's ever been on the market." Margaret's laugh crackled through the phone. "Clara, you're up to something, aren't you?" "Maybe," Clara said, a smile tugging at her lips. Just see what you can find. Over the next few weeks, Clara and Tom met with their children in secret. Lila, Mark, and Sophie brought their spouses and kids, crowding around the same kitchen table where Clara had read the letter. The grandchildren scribbled drawings of the lake house, oblivious to the adults' plans. Clara shared her idea. What if they didn't just boycott the reunion? What if they took the lake house itself? It's a long shot, Lila said, ever practical. That place has been in their family for generations. But it's not impossible, Sophie countered, her eyes gleaming. If they're struggling, and I've heard rumors they might sell. Mark, who'd spent his summers fixing up the lake house's docks and porches, nodded. It's worth more to us than to them. They barely use it anymore. Tom squeezed Clara's hand under the table. We've got savings, he said, and I'm tired of my family acting like they own us. Clara felt a surge of hope, but also fear. The lake house wasn't just a building, it was a symbol of everything she'd tried to belong to. Could they really take it? And if they did, what would it mean? By November, Margaret called with news. The Warrens were in financial trouble, bad investments, legal fees, and a few too many lavish parties. The lake house, though cherished, was a drain they couldn't afford. It wasn't listed yet, but whispers in the real estate world suggested they'd entertain offers. Clara's heart raced. This was their chance. She gathered her family again, this time with a plan. They'd pool their resources, Clara and Tom's savings, Lila's investment portfolio, Mark's small business profits, and Sophie's book royalties. It wouldn't be easy, but together, they could make an offer the Warrens couldn't refuse. As winter settled over Vermont, Clara stood on her porch, staring at the snow-dusted mountains. She thought of her parents, who'd taught her to stand tall no matter what. She thought of Tom, who'd chosen her over his family's approval all those years ago. And she thought of her children, who'd inherited her stubborn heart. The Warrens had tried to push her out, but they'd underestimated her. Clara wasn't just fighting for a house, she was fighting for her place in the world. The plan took shape in the quiet months of winter, each step deliberate, like the careful stitching Clara used to mend her grandchildren's torn jackets. By January, Margaret had arranged a meeting with the Warrens' estate manager, a stern man named Harold who handled their properties. Clara insisted on going alone, though Tom protested. I need to do this myself, she told him, her voice steady but her hands fidgeting with the hem of her coat. She wasn't just negotiating for a house. She was reclaiming her dignity. The meeting took place in a sleek Burlington office, all glass and steel, a world away from the cozy lake house. Harold, in his tailored suit, barely looked up from his papers as Clara sat across from him. Mrs. Warren, he began, and Clara corrected him sharply, Clara Thompson. His eyebrows twitched, but he pressed on. The Warrens were considering selling the lake house, he said, but only for the right price. When he named a figure $1.2 million, Clara's stomach twisted. It was more than they'd expected, but she didn't flinch. I'll need to see the property first, she said, her tone calm but firm. Harold agreed, scheduling a visit for the following week. Clara left the office with her head high, though her heart pounded. She called her children that night, relaying every detail. Lila crunched numbers. Mark offered to sell some equipment, and Sophie suggested crowdfunding among their extended family. We can do this, Sophie said, her voice crackling with excitement. We'll make it ours. The visit to the lake house was bittersweet. Clara drove up the winding road alone, the familiar sight of the cedar-shingled house stirring memories. She'd spent summers here, teaching her kids to swim in the lake. hosting barbecues, and listening to Tom's cousins tell stories under the stars. But there were other memories too, whispers about her humble background, sidelong glances when she spoke. She stepped onto the porch, her boots echoing on the weathered wood, and felt a surge of resolve. This place was hers, not because of the Warrens, but because of the love she'd poured into it. Inside, the house was quieter than she remembered, the furniture covered in dust sheets. The grand piano in the living room, once played by Tom's mother, stood silent. Clara ran her fingers over the banister, remembering how Mark had slid down it as a boy, laughing until he tumbled. She walked to the lake-facing windows, where she'd watched sunsets with Tom, dreaming of growing old here. The Warrens might own the deed, but Clara owned the memories. Back home, the family huddled over spreadsheets and bank statements. Lila's husband, a financial advisor, found a way to leverage their assets. Mark sold a truck and some tools, while Sophie's latest book advance covered a chunk of the down payment. Clara and Tom dipped into their retirement savings, a risk that made Clara's chest tighten but also felt right. "We're not just buying a house," Tom said, his eyes bright. "We're buying our future." By February, they had an offer ready, $1. $1 million. All cash. No contingencies. Clara insisted on delivering it in person. She met Harold again, this time at a coffee shop near the lake. He skimmed the offer, his face unreadable. "This is substantial," he admitted. "But I'll need to consult the family." Clara nodded, her heart steady now. She'd done her part. The rest was up to fate and the Warrens' greed. Days later, Harold called. The Warrens had accepted. Clara hung up the phone, her hands shaking, and turned to Tom, who was sipping tea at the kitchen table. "We got it," she whispered. Tom's face broke into a grin, and he pulled her into a hug, his cough forgotten for a moment. They called the kids, who erupted in cheers over speakerphone. Sophie was already planning a real reunion for the summer, one where everyone was welcome. But the victory was only half the battle. The Warrens, true to form, added conditions. They wanted to keep certain heirlooms furniture, paintings, even the old canoe Clara had painted with her grandkids. Clara agreed to most, but the canoe was non-negotiable. "It's ours," she told Harold firmly. "My grandchildren's handprints are on it." He didn't argue. As spring approached, the paperwork dragged on. The Warrens delayed, nitpicking over details, as if reluctant to let go. Clara stayed patient, but her resolve hardened. She wasn't just buying a house. She was rewriting a story that had cast her as an outsider for too long. She spent evenings poring over old photos of the lake house, remembering the good times and imagining new ones. Her grandchildren would grow up there, free from the Warrens' judgment. Her children would have a place to call home, not just a vacation spot. By April, the deal was close to closing. Clara and Tom drove to the lake house one last time before signing, walking the grounds hand in hand. The air smelled of pine and promise. Clara stood by the water's edge, picturing her family gathered around a bonfire, laughing, belonging. She'd spent years trying to fit into the Warrens' world. Now, she was building her own. The closing day arrived in early May, a sunny morning that felt like a gift. Clara dressed carefully, choosing a blue cardigan that Tom said brought out her eyes. The family gathered at the title office, a small building in Burlington with creaky floors and a view of the lake. Lila, Mark, and Sophie were there, along with their spouses and kids, who fidgeted with excitement. Clara felt their energy, a hum of love and determination that steadied her nerves. The Warrens sent Harold to represent them, sparing Clara the sight of their pinched faces. He slid the papers across the table, his expression neutral. Clara signed her name, Clara Thompson. Not Warren, her pen steady despite the weight of the moment. Tom's hand rested on her shoulder, warm and grounding. When the last signature was done, Harold handed over the keys, a heavy ring that jangled with possibility. Clara clutched them, her heart swelling. Outside, the family erupted in cheers. Sophie hugged Clara so tightly it hurt, whispering, "You did it, Mom." Mark, usually reserved, grinned and said, "Let's go see our house." The grandkids ran circles around them, chanting about swimming and s'mores. Clara looked at Tom, his eyes misty but proud, and felt a peace she hadn't known in years. They drove to the lake house as a caravan, cars packed with blankets and picnic baskets. The house looked different now, not just a Warren heirloom, but theirs. Clara unlocked the door, the creak of it familiar yet new. The kids ran inside, their laughter echoing off the walls. Lila started planning renovations and new kitchen, brighter paint. Mark inspected the docks, already talking about repairs. Sophie, ever the dreamer, sketched ideas for a garden where they'd plant flowers for Clara's late mother. That night, they lit a bonfire by the lake. Clara sat on a folding chair, a blanket over her knees, watching her grandchildren roast marshmallows. Tom sat beside her, his hand in hers. "We did it, Clara," he said softly. "This is ours now." She nodded, her throat tight. The firelight danced on the water, and for the first time, Clara felt like she belonged here not as a guest, but as the heart of this place. But the Warrens weren't done. A week later, a letter arrived not from the family, but from Tom's sister, Evelyn, the unofficial matriarch. It was polite but cold, congratulating Clara on the purchase while hinting that the family felt betrayed. They'd expected to keep the house in their name, even if they sold it. Clara read the letter to Tom, her voice steady. "They thought we'd beg for their approval," she said. "They're wrong." Tom's cough had worsened, and Clara noticed he tired more easily. She pushed the letter aside and focused on him, urging him to rest. The lake house became their refuge, a place to heal and rebuild. Clara spent days cleaning, dusting off memories and making new ones. She hung photos of her children and grandchildren, replacing the Warrens' stern portraits. The canoe, with its colorful handprints, sat proudly by the dock. By June, the family planned their own reunion. Sophie sent invitations to cousins, aunts, and uncles, not just from Clara's side, but from Tom's too. Those who'd never bought into the Warrens' elitism. The guest list grew, a mix of old friends and distant relatives who valued love over lineage. Clara cooked her famous blueberry pies, and Mark built a new picnic table. Lila organized games for the kids, while Sophie wrote a speech about family. Real family, the kind that chooses you. The reunion was set for July, and Clara felt a mix of nerves and excitement. She wanted it to be perfect, not to prove anything to the Warrens, but to show her family what they could be. She walked the lake house grounds daily, tending the garden, checking the docks, making sure every detail was right. Tom helped when he could, though his energy waned. Clara watched him closely, her heart aching but resolute. This house, this moment, was for them. As the reunion neared, Clara found an old journal in the attic, one she'd kept during their first summers here. She read entries about teaching Lila to fish, Mark's first dive off the dock, Sophie's stories by the fire. Tears fell as she realized how much this place had always been hers, even when the Warrens tried to make her feel otherwise. She closed the journal, vowing to fill it with new memories. The night before the reunion, Clara stood on the porch, the lake shimmering under the moon. Tom joined her. His breathing labored, but his smile warm. "You're my home, Clara," he said. "Always have been." She leaned into him, the keys to the lake house heavy in her pocket, and knew they'd already won. The morning of the reunion dawned bright, the lake sparkling like a promise. Clara woke early, her hands busy with preparations. She baked bread, chopped vegetables for a salad, and set out chairs on the lawn. Her grandchildren helped, stringing fairy lights between the trees, their laughter a melody that eased Clara's nerves. By noon, cars began arriving, spilling out cousins, friends, and neighbors, people who'd known Clara and Tom for decades, who'd shared their joys and sorrows. Sophie's speech was the heart of the day. She stood on the porch, her voice clear and strong, reading from a notebook she'd filled with stories of their family. "This house," she said, gesturing to the cedar walls behind her, "is more than wood and stone. It's where we learn to love, to fight, to forgive. My mom made it that way, even when others tried to shut her out." Clara's eyes stung as the crowd applauded, their faces warm with affection. She caught Tom's gaze, his pride mirroring her own. The day unfolded like a dream. Children splashed in the lake, their squeals mingling with the clink of glasses and the hum of conversation. Mark led a group to the dock, teaching his cousins to fish. Lila organized a relay race, her competitive streak drawing laughs. Clara moved through the crowd, hugging old friends, listening to stories, and feeling the weight of the Warrens' rejection lift. This was family, not a name or a crest, but people who showed up. Tom stayed close, his energy low but his spirit high. Clara watched him, her heart tightening each time he coughed. She'd noticed the doctor's appointments piling up, the way he leaned on her a little more. But today, he was radiant, laughing with their grandchildren, telling stories of summers long past. Clara held on to these moments, storing them like treasures. As evening fell, the bonfire roared, casting a golden glow over the lawn. Someone brought a guitar, and soon, voices rose and sung old folk tunes Clara's mother had loved. She sat beside Tom, their hands entwined, watching their family knit together. A cousin from Tom's side, one who'd always been kind, pulled Clara aside. "I'm sorry about the others," he said quietly. "They were wrong about you." Clara nodded, her throat tight. "Thank you," she whispered. "But we're okay now." The reunion wasn't just a celebration. It was a declaration. Clara had spent years trying to fit into the Warrens' world. But here, surrounded by her people, she realized she'd built something better. The lake house, once a symbol of exclusion, was now a beacon of inclusion. She looked at the canoe by the dock, its handprints glowing in the firelight, and felt a surge of gratitude. But the Warrens hadn't faded entirely. A few days after the reunion, Evelyn called. Her voice was clipped, her words carefully chosen. "I hear your little party was a success," she said. Clara bristled, but kept her tone even. "It was our reunion, Evelyn. You could have come." There was a pause. Then Evelyn's voice softened. "Just a fraction. Maybe next year." Clara didn't believe her, but the words felt like a crack in the Warrens' armor. Tom's health became Clara's focus in the weeks that followed. His cough worsened, and tests confirmed what she'd feared: lung cancer. Advanced but treatable. Clara poured her energy into caring for him, turning the lake house into a sanctuary. They spent quiet mornings on the porch, watching the sunrise, and evenings by the fire, talking about their life together. Clara refused to let fear steal these moments. The lake house, their hard-won prize, gave them a place to fight from. The family rallied around Tom. Lila researched treatments, Mark built a ramp for the porch, and Sophie filled the house with music and stories. The grandchildren drew pictures for Tom, taping them to the walls until the house felt alive with color. Clara watched it all, her heart aching but full. She'd fought for this place, not just for herself, but for them. By August, Tom started chemotherapy. Clara drove him to appointments, holding his hand through the long hours. The lake house became their refuge between treatments, a place where they could breathe. Clara tended the garden, planting roses for her mother, and cooked Tom's favorite meals. She found strength in the routine, in the love that filled the house. One evening, as they sat by the lake, Tom took Clara's hand. "You gave me this," he said, his voice hoarse but warm. "Not just the house, but us." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, the weight of his words settling deep. They'd faced rejection, fought for their place, and built something unbreakable. The lake house was theirs, but their love was the real victory. Fall came too quickly, the leaves turning crimson as Tom's strength waned. Clara spent her days balancing hope and fear, cooking meals he could barely eat, reading to him when he couldn't sleep. The lake house was their haven, its walls soaking up their quiet moments. Clara hung more photo snapshots from the reunion, her grandchildren's faces beaming. She wanted Tom to see their legacy, to know they'd won. The family visited often, filling the house with noise and warmth. Lila brought medical journals, researching new treatments. Mark fixed leaks and painted walls, making the house their own. Sophie wrote poems about the lake, reading them to Tom as he rested. The grandchildren were Clara's light, their chatter a reminder of why she'd fought so hard. She taught them to bake, their small hands sticky with dough, and told them stories of their grandfather's youth. But the Warrens lingered like a shadow. Evelyn sent another letter, this one more conciliatory, asking to visit the lake house for old times' sake. Clara read it aloud to Tom, her voice flat. "She wants to see what we've done," she said. Tom shook his head, his eyes tired. "Let her come," he said. "She'll see we don't need her approval." Clara agreed, but her heart wasn't in it. She didn't want Evelyn's judgment tainting their home. Evelyn arrived on a chilly October afternoon, her silver hair sleek, her coat too expensive for the muddy lake path. Clara greeted her politely, offering tea. Evelyn's eyes roamed the house, noting the new curtains, the children's artwork. "You've changed it," she said, her tone unreadable. Clara nodded. "It's ours now." They sat on the porch, the silence heavy. Evelyn spoke of the past, of summers when the Warrens ruled this place. Clara listened, but her mind was on Tom, resting upstairs. Before leaving, Evelyn surprised her. "I was wrong," she said, her voice low. "About you. About this." Clara searched her face, seeing a flicker of regret. She didn't forgive. Not fully, but she nodded. "We're happy here," she said. Evelyn left without another word, and Clara felt a weight lift. The Warrens' hold was loosening. Tom's condition worsened by November. Clara rarely left his side, sleeping in a chair by his bed. The lake house, once a battleground, was now a sanctuary. She read him letters from their children, played his favorite records, and held his hand through the long nights. The family gathered often, their presence a balm. Clara drew strength from them, from the house, from the love they'd built. One crisp morning, Tom asked to sit by the lake. Clara bundled him in blankets, pushing his wheelchair to the water's edge. The air was sharp, the lake a mirror of the sky. "I'm proud of you," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You made this ours." Clara's eyes filled, but she smiled. We made it ours, she said. They sat in silence, the world quiet except for the lap of waves. Tom passed a week later, surrounded by family. Clara held his hand, her heart breaking but grateful for every moment. The lake house felt emptier without him, but it also held him in the creak of the porch, the handprints on the canoe, the roses in the garden. Clara grieved, but she wasn't alone. Her children and grandchildren stayed close, their love a lifeline. The following summer, Clara planned another reunion. She invited everyone, friends, neighbors, even a few Warrens who'd reached out with kindness. The house buzzed with life, children running, adults laughing. Clara stood on the porch, watching it all, her heart full. She'd lost Tom, but she'd gained something enduring, a home that belonged to her, to her family, to their story. Sophie wrote a book about it, dedicating it to Clara and Tom. Lila opened a clinic nearby, bringing her healing to the community. Mark built a gazebo by the lake, a place for future gatherings. Clara tended the garden, planting new flowers each spring. The lake house wasn't just a victory over the Warrens. It was a testament to love, resilience, and the family they'd built. As the reunion ended, Clara stood by the lake, the keys in her pocket. She thought of the letter that had started it all, the one that tried to push her out. She'd turned that rejection into something beautiful. The Warrens had lost more than a house. They'd lost the chance to be part of something real. Clara smiled, the lake sparkling before her, and knew she was exactly where she belonged. Years passed, and the lake house became a cornerstone of Clara's life. Each summer, the reunion grew, drawing new faces and old friends. Clara, now in her early 70s, moved slower, her hands stiffer, but her spirit was unbroken. She'd walk the grounds daily, touching the roses she'd planted for Tom, whispering to him in the quiet moments. The house was alive with memories: Tom's laugh, the grandchildren's games, the night they'd signed the papers and claimed it as their own. Clara's children took on more, easing her load. Lila oversaw the house's upkeep, her practical mind ensuring every detail was perfect. Mark built a treehouse for the grandkids, his hammer echoing through the summers. Sophie published her book, The House by the Lake, which became a quiet hit, its story of resilience resonating with readers. Clara read it in tears, proud of her daughter, prouder still of their family. The Warrens faded into the background. A few reached out, some with apologies, others with curiosity. Clara welcomed those who were genuine, but she no longer needed their approval. The lake house was a symbol now, not of their rejection, but of her triumph. She'd turned their exclusion into a legacy of love. Clara spent her days teaching her grandchildren to swim, just as she'd taught their parents. She baked with them, their laughter filling the kitchen. She told stories of Tom, keeping him alive in their hearts. The canoe, its handprints faded but still there, was a favorite for lake adventures. Clara watched from the shore, her heart swelling with every paddle. One evening, as the sun set over the lake, Clara sat on the porch with Sophie. They sipped tea, the air warm with summer's end. "You know," Sophie said, "this place is you, Mom. It's everything you are: strong, warm, open." Clara smiled, her eyes on the water. "It's us," she said. "All of us." The lake house stood as a testament to what family could be. Clara had fought for it, not with anger, but with love, not for revenge, but for belonging. She'd taken a place meant to exclude her and made it a home for everyone. The Warrens' letter, once a wound, was now a distant memory, its sting replaced by the warmth of her family's laughter. As Clara grew older, she began writing her own journal, filling it with stories of the lake house, of Tom, of their children and grandchildren. She wanted them to know where they came from, what they'd built. One entry, written on a quiet fall night, summed it up. The Warrens thought they could push me out, but they didn't know me. They didn't know us. This house is ours, not because we bought it, but because we filled it with love. Clara's final reunion, years later, was her favorite. The lawn was packed, the lake alive with swimmers, the air thick with the smell of barbecue and roses. She sat in her chair, weaker now but content, watching her great-grandchildren play. Lila, Mark, and Sophie stood nearby, their own children grown, their love for her unwavering. Clara closed her eyes, the sound of laughter washing over her, and felt Tom's presence in the breeze. She passed quietly that winter, in the lake house, surrounded by family. They buried her ashes under the rose garden, next to Tom's. The house lived on, a beacon for generations. Sophie took up the journal, adding her own stories. Lila and Mark kept the reunions going, each one a tribute to Clara's heart. The lake house stood, year after year, its cedar walls weathered but strong. It wasn't just a house. It was a story of a woman who refused to be broken, who built a home from rejection, who taught her family what it meant to belong. Clara's legacy wasn't in the deed or the keys, but in the love that filled every corner, in the handprints on the canoe, in the roses that bloomed each spring. She'd won, not by proving the Warrens wrong, but by proving herself right.